Prof Nuria, apa suaranya terdengar, Prof? Halo, halo Prof Nuria. Halo, selamat pagi, Prof.
Apa?
Halo, selamat pagi.
Terdengar, sangat terdengar.
Ah,
Baik, selamat pagi Bapak Ibu. Acara akan segera kita mulai. Mohon untuk dapat menempati tempat duduk yang telah disediakan. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the multifunction room of Polytechnic STLN Jakarta. We will begin this event shortly. Kindly ask for all the participants to be seated. Before we start, there are several rules for this meeting. Participants attending at the venue must sit orderly in the area provided. Please fill in the front row first. All electronic devices, especially cell phones, are on silent mode or switch off during the event. Participants attending online at the Zoom meeting, mute the microphone and turn on the video. For safety conduct, you are located on the first floor of Multifunction Room, Polytechnic STLN Jakarta or NIPA campus. The restrooms are available on the west wing of this venue, and this room has one main exit located at the right side of the venue. In case of disaster, please remain calm and move towards the meeting point in the parking area. The safety briefing video is available to inform you the details.
Keselamatan adalah prioritas utama dalam setiap aktivitas di ruang serbaguna. Sesuai dari prosedur keamanan dan keselamatan, berikut kami sampaikan arahan keselamatan ruang serbaguna Politeknik Setialan, Jakarta. Saat ini, Anda berada di ruang serbaguna Politeknik Setialan, Jakarta. Ruang ini memiliki satu pintu utama, yang terletak di bagian barat daya ruangan. Apar di ruangan ini terletak di dalam pada bagian dinding belakang ruangan. Jika terjadi keadaan darurat seperti gempa dan kebakaran, mohon agar tetap tenang dan jangan panik. Berikut merupakan cara yang harus diikuti. Pertama, berjalanlah melalui jalur evakuasi menuju titik kumpul atau sesuai arahan petugas berwajib. Utamakan ibu hamil, lansia, dan penyandang disabilitas atau rekan yang memiliki penyakit nafas. Lepaskan sepatu hak tinggi Anda jika terjadi keadaan darurat. Jika terjadi kepungan asap, merangkaklah keluar, karena posisi ini memudahkan Anda untuk bernafas. Jika terjadi gempa bumi, usahakan berlindung di bawah meja atau merapat ke dinding. Titik kumpul evakuasi berada di luar gedung Politeknik Setialan, Jakarta. Mari kita ciptakan lingkungan yang aman, nyaman, dan tertib di ruang serbaguna. Keselamatan kita adalah tanggung jawab bersama.
Thank you for your attention. Ladies and gentlemen, the event is about to begin. The Honorable Professor Dr. Nurliah Nurdin MA, Director of NIPA School of Administration, Jakarta. The Honorable Professor Thomas Pepinsky, Professor of Government and Public Policy from Cornell University. The Honorable Dr. Malasondang Silitonga MA, Vice Director 1 on Academic Affairs. The Honorable Dr. Neneng Sri Rahayu, STMSI, Vice Director 2 on General Affairs. The Honorable Dr. Edi Sutrisno, SAMSI, Vice Director 3 on Student Affairs. Mrs. Ratri Istania, PhD, Secretary of Department of Public Administrations and Moderator. All policy analysts, all beloved alumni, and all respected lecturers, staff, and colleagues from NIPA School of Administration, Jakarta. Good morning. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Salam, Om Swastiastu, Namo Buddhaya, peace be upon you all. Welcome to our public lecture on building public leadership, the urgency of establishing a school of public policy in Indonesia. My name is Kay Sadinya, and I will be your master of ceremony for today's event. This public lecture event aims to enhance students and wider public's understandings of the importance of public leadership in responding to contemporary governance challenges, while highlighting the urgency of establishing a school of public policy in Indonesia as a strategic foundations for developing competitive, ethical, and future-ready national leaders. This event is using blended method, as we have around participants in the 9th NIPA School of Administration Jakarta, and we have participants in the Zoom meeting. In addition to being shown in the Zoom meeting, the event is also broadcasted live in the YouTube channel of Politeknik Istialan Jakarta. The rundown for this event are National Anthem of Republic of Indonesia, opening remarks from the Director of NIPA School of Administration Jakarta, photo sessions and certificate, public lecturer with the key speaker from Professor Thomas Pepinsky, discussions and Q&A, closing and wrap-up. As an official ceremony to commence this program, we will start by singing the National Anthem of Republic of Indonesia. All audience, please stand up. All participants, please be seated. To commence today's agenda, we will start by inviting everyone to take a silent moment for our opening praying. May we all be blessed with guidance and protection as we embark on our activities. Amen. Thank you. Now we would like to invite the Director of NIPA School of Administration Jakarta to give opening remarks for this public lecture. For Professor Dr. Nurliah Nurdin is joining us in the Zoom meeting as she is now in Bandung for NIPA's leadership meeting. To Professor Nurliah MA, the time is yours.
Yeah, thank you very much, dear Mbak Keisha, and all the distinguished guests right now who is in the campus. Professor Thomas Pepinsky, how are you doing? I'm so very sorry that I couldn't be there, but I really would like to be there. And respected lecturers, students, policymakers, members of the public, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good morning. and welcome. As we enter 2026, Indonesia and indeed the world stands at the decisive crossroad.
Hari ini bisa manfaatkan situ dan
We are living in an era where formal independence no longer guarantees real sovereignty, where public institutions increasingly risk serving elites' interests rather than the public good, and where the language of humanity is often reduced to diplomatic rhetoric, even as the violence, occupation, and genocide unfold before our eyes. Broadcast daily yet insufficiently acted upon. This is not merely a crisis of politics. It is a crisis of public administration and public policy. Globally, evidence shows that when leadership is weak or captured, public administration becomes an instrument of elite consolidation rather than public service. According to Oxfam's, the richest of 1% control nearly half of global wealth, while public systems, education, health, social protection remain underfunded or misdirected in many countries. The World Bank warns that policy captures and weak bureaucratic capability are among the strongest predictors of persistent inequality and democratic erosions. Indonesia is not immune. Despite our constitutional commitment to welfare and justice, over 20% of the national budget is allocated to education, yet learning poverty remains a serious challenge. World Bank data indicate that around 1/3 of Indonesian children aged 10 struggle to read and understand the simple text. This is not a failure of spending alone. It is a failure of policy design, implementation capacity, and leadership judgment. The same pattern appears across sectors. Regional inequality persists despite decades of decentralization. Digital government initiatives advance rapidly in form, yet unevenly in function. Bureaucratic procedures multiply, while problem-solving capacity often stagnates. There are not technical problems, there are governance problems. At the global level, we see an even starker reality. Independent states are often compelled through trade regimes, debt structures, technology dependence, or geopolitical pressure to align with the interests of more powerful nations. In such a world, public policy risks becoming transactional, and humanitarian values become ceremonial language invoked but not enforced. When international institutions fail to stop mass suffering, when rules apply selectively, when administration obeys power rather than justice, public administration itself must be questioned, reformed, and rearmed with ethical purpose. Yet let me clear, as a school of public policy must not exist merely as a debating room for social justice, nor as a factory for policy papers and the end of labor itself. Social justice that lives only in publication is fragile. What Indonesia and the world urgently need is a public leadership that is born from policy education and proven in action. Public leadership doesn't emerge automatically from bureaucracy. It is constructed through rigorous policy training, ethical formation, and exposure to real power dynamics, where decisions have consequences for forests, rivers, coastlines, and human lives. Without this, public administration risks becoming procedural, silent, or worse, complicit. We have seen the cost of weak public leadership too many times. Natural disasters, that are labeled as an act of God are in reality often policy failures. Floods, landslides, forest fires, coastal erosion are frequently the outcomes of regulatory capture, where small or medium business enterprises operating with hidden agendas collaborate with one or two acronyms in government, bypassing environmental safeguards and spatial planning rules. When leadership is absent, administrations become permissive. When leadership is compromised, policy becomes destructive. In such condition, public administration does not protect the public. It negotiates with risk. And when that happens, citizens pay the price with loss of livelihoods, displacement, and lives. This is precisely why strong public leadership must be delivered, cultivated, not assumed. School of Public Policy play a decisive role here, not by teaching students what should be written, by training them how to decide, how to resist pressure, how to use evidence to confront power, and how to say no when public interest is threatened. Better public policy doesn't emerge from neutrality. It emerges from leadership with clarity and courage. Leaders who understand data, law, political economy, and ethics, who are prepared to act when evidence contradicts vested interest. Without such a leadership, even the best designed policies will fall in implementation, distorted by rent-seeking and short-term gains. Therefore, the mission of school public policy is ultimately a leadership mission. It must produce policy leaders who can intervene, who can redesign incentives, enforce accountability, and realign development with sustainability and justice. Leaders who understand that preventing disaster is not a technical issue, but a governance decision. In public leadership remains weak. Public policy remains reactive. But if leadership is strong, informed, and principled, policy becomes a force of prevention, protection, and public trust. And this ultimately is the challenge before us today. This is why today's discussions matters. As Indonesia moves towards Golden Indonesia 2045, the critical question is not only what policy we adopt, but who designed them, with what capacity, and under what moral compass. Do we have institutions capable of producing policy leaders who are analytically rigorous, ethically grounded, and geopolitically aware? The National Institute of Public Administration has been long backbone of Indonesia's civil service development. At the NIPA School Administration Jakarta, we take pride in strengthening the professionalism, integrity, and administrative competence. Yet, we also recognize hard truth. Modern governance requires more than good administrators. It requires strategic policy architects. Across the world, many countries have responded to this challenge by developing schools of public policy. Institutions designed not to replace public administration, but to complement it, bringing theory and practice, data and judgment, national interest, and global responsibility. Therefore, today we gather to reflect on three critical questions. First, how can a school of public policy help close the persistent gap between policy formulation and real-world implementation in Indonesia? Second, what role should an institution play in developing human capital capable of safeguarding sovereignty, equity, and public trust as we approach 2045? And last, what lesson can Indonesia learn from international experience, particularly from our respective guest lectures today? In training policy analysis, who can think strategically, act ethically, and navigate complex power structures? Professor Thomas Pepinsky, we are really great and deeply honored to have you today. From Walter La Faber, Professors, Government and Public Policy at Cornell University. You have fly over 18 hours, probably more, if you have a stop by. Quite long, and I'm really sorry I couldn't meet you today. I wish I could. For your scholarship on political economy, institution, and governments, offer valuable insight into how policy education can either reinforce elite dominance or become a tool of public transformation. These forums is not academically formally. We have invited not only students, but anyone who interested in public policy. So it is a moment of institutional self-reflection. The future of public administrations depends on leadership. And leadership depends how and where we educate those entrusted with public power. Let us engage this dialogue with courage, honesty, commitment to ensure that public policy, once again, belongs to the public, not merely to the power. Thank you very much, Professor Pepinsky, for your really warm heart to come to our campus. My warm remarks from Jatinangor, and for all the participants who is come offline in campus, also online. My salute and gratitude. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Please give a round of applause for Professor Nurlia. Thank you, Professor, for the opening remarks. Moving on to the next sessions, we will now commence a certificate awarding as an appreciation from NIPA School of Administration, Jakarta, to our distinguished speaker, and continued with group photo. We invite Professor Thomas Pepinsky to move to the front area, and we invite Dr. Mala Sondang Silitonga on behalf of NIPA campus to the stage and hand over the certificate. Please give applause. Okay, now we invite for a group photo. We invite all vice directors, Ms. Mala Sondang, Ms. Neneng Sri Rahayu, and also Mr. Adi Sutrisno, and also Mrs. Ratri Istania as moderator to take place in the group photo on the stage. Okay. Okay, thank you. Please return to your seat. And lastly, not to forget, we also want to invite all participants in the Zoom meeting to have a group photo. You can turn on your camera and have a group photo. Okay, and Prof. Nurlia already ready with L. Just the group Zoom. Okay, on my mark, in 3, 2, 1. Okay, thank you very much for your cooperation. Oh, sorry. For the last one, please kindly ask for your cooperation to have a group photo with all participants. Please, Professor Thomas, to move to the front area, not on the stage. And also, yeah. And also all vice directors, Mrs. Ratri, Mrs. Ami, and all participants, please stand up. Okay. Okay. Thank you very much for your cooperation. Okay. Now, without further ado, we will jump into our main programs, the public lecture sessions with key theme, Building Public Leadership, the Urgency of Establishing a School of Public Policy in Indonesia, which will be delivered by Professor Thomas Pepinsky and moderated by Mrs. Ratri Istania, PhD. Ratri Istania is the Secretary of Department of Public Administration. She is an inaugural fellow from Cornell School of Public Policy, and she is also a senior fellow of IFAR at Majaya University. To Mrs. Ratri Istania, we invite you to guide the sessions. Please give a warm round of applause for Mrs. Ratri.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Please allow me to stand up. No, you're fine. Thank you so much for coming. It is a very nice gathering with, of course, Professor Thomas Pepinsky with us, Ibu Director, and all of the managerial positions in Politeknik STLN Jakarta, and also my colleagues, and also policy analyst community, and also other participants attending this discussion. These discussions will be held in hybrid platform. So anyone can jump in discussions. The discussion can be also conducted in Indonesia because Mr. Thomas Pepinsky of, should I call you just Tom? It's okay. So Tom lived in Indonesia for quite a while. 6 months is an okay time for learning Indonesia, and he can speak Indonesian. So I think this is going to be a very terrific opportunity for us to share our knowledge with him. Ladies and gentlemen, so I would like to introduce Professor Thomas Pepinsky in a very formal way, which means that I will read your short bio. So Thomas B. Pepinsky is Professor of Government and Public Policy at Cornell University and holds the Walter F. LaVever Professorship. He earned his PhD in Political Science from Yale University in 2007, following undergraduate training at Brown University. Trained in comparative politics and political economy, his research focuses on development, inequality, and democratic accountability, with a regional emphasis on Southeast Asia. He has held fellowship at leading institutions, including now the Brookings Institutions, right? And actively engaged policy-relevant scholarship. Most recently, he contributed, helping me actually, writing the foreword for the forthcoming edited volume. Is a book that will be hopefully published in June 2026 about decentralization's politics and democracy, evaluating 25 years of Indonesia's decentralizations. It will be published by City University of Hong Kong series. This is our Southeast Asia series, Routledge. reflecting his long-standing engagement with debates on decentralizations, democratic governance, and comparative politics, and so many things that he's been involving so far. Ladies and gentlemen, hadirin sekalian yang ada di virtual, yang ada di ruang ini, we are very honored to have you here to enlighten us with your thought about the future public policy in Indonesia, the future public policy in the United States, which I understand so far from the news and from my experience when I was there as a fellow of Cornell J.P. Brooks School of Public Policy, that we are living in a very turbulent situation, uncertainty. So hopefully by having him, we can mutually understand the importance of public policy school, the professional one, combining the training, combining the educations at the various level to inspire how policy making is supposed to be. The democracy, sustaining equality, very essential. Participation from publics is very essential nowadays. But declining democracy across the globe poses a great challenge. Risk public policy being formulated in a very different way. So here, without further ado, I will welcome you and please enlighten us. How is it going to be conducted? So Professor Thomas Pepinsky will give sort of like a lecture a bit, about 30 or so minutes, and then it will be followed by questions and answers. So feel free from the audience to jump in, but after my cue, because I will ask the questions first, and then you can have a question. Please, Tom, the stage is yours. You can stand up, you can sit, it's whatever you please.
Very much. Thank you very much. Terima kasih. It's my great honor to be with you all today, to deliver some comments, reflections, and thoughts and ideas about the urgency of establishing a school of public policy in Indonesia and the comparative perspective that I want to bring as an American who cares about Indonesia, who cares about public policy, and wants to think about how we might learn from one another in a time that's truly unprecedented. I want to, before I begin, a couple brief notes of thanks. So I want to thank Ratri for all of the help in putting this together. I want to thank all of you for coming here today to see my, those of you who are here in person, those of you who are here online. Ibu Director, I'm really thankful for your very wise opening remarks, which really, they agree quite well with the way that I think about public policy and the challenges that we face today. I also want to minta maaf karena saya akan berbahasa Inggris dalam acara ini. Karena saya baru 4 hari di Indonesia dan belum terbiasa dengan bahasa Indonesia lagi. Tapi, ya. Tapi saya kira itu sangat penting untuk bisa berbahasa supaya saya bisa jelas dan persis. Saya mau pakai bahasa Inggris, tapi dalam acara ini kalau ada pertanyaan yang mau disampaikan dalam bahasa Indonesia bisa lah, bukan masalah. So again, let me start by just reflecting on the United States for 1 minute, because I come here as an American to a country that is not my own, but which I care about deeply. And I come here as an American with a sense of real anxiety and honestly a sense of shame about the situation politically in my own country. I remain quite optimistic about the future of democracy within my country and the future of politics. But that optimism comes with some fear, because things right now are difficult. And many of the Many of the things I will talk about in this presentation today will seem completely irrelevant from the perspective of a US administration which is uninterested in serving the public, as far as I'm concerned. And so I want to start by helping you to understand that I know just how hard it is to feel optimistic about what our government can do and our role in making government work better. But I also think we must be optimistic because the alternative is to give up, and we are not able to do that. And then finally, I believe that the greatest impact that my country's democratic dysfunction will have is not on my own citizens, my fellow Americans, it will be on the rest of the world. So I think the real dangers that we will face from the United States democratic dysfunction will be borne by the rest of the world. And for that, on behalf of my fellow countrymen, on behalf of the Americans, I wish to apologize. The behavior of my administration is shameful, it's unethical, and people know better. And so let's talk about how to make it better. Like, what should we do? Today's topic is the urgency of establishing a school of public policy in Indonesia. And I thought for a while about how I might structure today's presentation. What should I talk about? How should I think about it? And I think that the best way to structure my remarks is to start from my own experiences at Cornell. I do not have a degree in public policy myself, but I do teach now in a school of public policy. I was not trained to teach public policy. I was not trained to study public policy. However, just about everything that I do actually is related to public policy. And I suspect that that is true for many of you as well. You are not policy scholars explicitly, but you are policy scholars in point of fact. You actually do study policy. And so I'll tell you a little bit about how I came to the School of Public Policy, and I'll use that as a foundation to speak later about how this is structured, why we put the School of Public Policy together, and the similarities and differences between the conditions of public policy education in the United States, which I know very well, and in Indonesia, which is what we will talk about today. So my background is as a political scientist, just like Ratri, right? My degree is in political science, and my dissertation was about economic policy in Indonesia and Malaysia during the economic crisis of 1997, 1998. So as a political scientist, I thought about why do governments implement policies the way that they do? And why do different governments implement different policies to confront the same problem? But I never thought, and I can tell you the answer if you want, but it's not why we're here today. But the interesting thing is that I never thought that I was a policy scholar. I just thought that policy was the thing that I happened to be writing about. But in the subsequent years, as my career unfolded, I realized that a good portion of what is interesting about politics is not the questions of what does the Constitution look like, or who passes the laws, or who supports the president or who doesn't. They weren't questions of constitutional engineering. They weren't questions of public opinion. They were questions of what allows a government to deliver for its citizens the things that they want, either through enacting specific policies that respond to specific problems, or by creating the conditions in which the right policy solutions can be developed and found by non-government actors. And I think that is how we should think about public policy education in the United States and in Indonesia. We are interested in what allows governments to serve their citizens in the ways that allow them to meet their demands, to thrive, to flourish, to be healthy, to be happy, to be effective. And how do you structure a government in ways that allow ordinary citizens to take the initiative themselves to do policy on their own? Policy is not something that policymakers do alone. It happens in concert with stakeholders, with ordinary citizens, with politicians, with non-governmental organizations, with those abroad, and so forth. And I think when I come to Indonesia, I see and I hear all of the time this question: how do we make our government serve the interests of the people? What are the ways that we ensure or guarantee or at least prepare our government to respond to the needs of the people? What does it mean to deliver good policy to ordinary citizens? And what are the obstacles and the processes that we need to understand that make policy making work? There's a discipline that studies that, and that is the discipline of public policy. Again, not my discipline, but one that I've come to understand because that's what I actually think political scientists like me really care about in most cases. Like I said, some of us study public opinion, some of us study constitutions, but many of us actually study what governments actually do. And public policy is the field that works on this. And it's interesting, I'll now turn to the point where I talk about a little bit of my process. It's interesting that the university where I work, Cornell University, is one of the largest and most comprehensive universities in the United States. Our motto at Cornell is any person, any study. And what that means is any type of person, regardless of your background, regardless of what you look like, regardless of your gender or your race or your ethnicity or your religion or your nationality, any person can study anything. You can study veterinary, you can study Indonesian language, you can study mathematics, you can study engineering, you can study anything. So we're a big university, we serve all types of people, and we have all sorts of programs that do all sorts of things. But one thing when I arrived at Cornell that we did not have was a School of Public Policy. It was one of the oddities of Cornell that we had so many other programs, but we did not have a School of Public Policy. Why did we not have a School of Public Policy? Because public policy is kind of a new field. It's not a social science discipline. It's not a humanities discipline. It's not an engineering discipline. It was something that was just actually really hard to fit into the organizational structure of Cornell University. But as I spent time at Cornell over the past 17 years now, I learned something, which is that faculty at Cornell, my colleagues, professors in my department of government, in other departments of applied economics, of management, of business, many of us actually had for years been trying to create a School of Public Policy. So there was interest in public policy. There was a lack of public policy, and yet strangely, we actually didn't have a School of Public Policy, even though the demand was there and the interest was there. So I became involved in a process about 5 years ago to fix that problem. And I thought, well, we just have to figure out how to do it, and we'll do it. And then I realized, like any good scholar of public policy should, that the reason why we didn't have a School of Public Policy was because it's really hard to make one. And I learned through this process that people had been trying to create a School of Public Policy at Cornell for 60 years. So back before I was born, when my parents were 10 years old, was the first time that somebody attempted to create a School of Public Policy at Cornell. And they would attempt every 10 years in a cycle. And every time that they tried to create a School of Public Policy, they failed. And they failed because the model that they used was that to create a School of Public Policy, we need to have a large amount of money to hire professors of public policy, and they will build the school. The idea was start with money, and money gives you the ability to hire people, and the people you hire will build the institution. And as you all know, there's not a lot of money lying around to build new universities, new programs, right? There's nobody out there who's just going to give you money. So every time there is a committee formed and an initiative started to create a School of Public Policy at Cornell, what happened was they would produce a report, and the report would say, we need to hire 30 new professors in public policy. And the administrators would say, well, you can't do that because we can't pay for it. And so that would be the end of the initiative. So in 2019, I was asked to lead, I think, the 6th iteration of this. So to try again, make a school of public policy. I had a partner, her name is Maria Fitzpatrick. She's an economist at Cornell. And she and I sat down and said, okay, we're gonna try it again. And we said, the one thing that we did differently is instead of putting together an idea and then going to the administrators and saying, here's what we want, this is how much it's gonna cost. We approached the administrators first and said, how much money is available to do this? And the answer was, no money. You need to build a school of public policy with no resources. How can you build a new school with no resources? What's the solution? It's a policy problem to build a school of public policy with no resources. We have an objective. We understand what the resource constraints are. And we work to achieve that objective within those constraints. Classic policy problem. So what we did is we started with existing resources that we had at Cornell. What are our resources at Cornell? We have very good human resources. We have lots of people like me who are not trained in public policy, who do not teach public policy, but who want to be part of a school of public policy. So what we did is we met with everybody. We had, I think, 200 meetings in the course of the next year. I would have 3 meetings a day with Maria. This is during the pandemic, so everything was on Zoom. I was sitting in my daughter's bedroom, Zooming with people. And we approached various faculty and various units and said, are you interested in a school of public policy? Would you like a school of public policy? Would you participate in a school of public policy if it existed? And what do you want out of it? And through this process, we learned that there was a lot of interest in participating in a school of public policy. And people thought that it would come with money. And we would say, no, there's no money. Do you still want to do it? And then about half of the people would say, okay, no, I don't want to do it. There's no money. But the other half said, yes, I'm still interested. And from that foundation, we proposed how to make a school of public policy with no resources at all, with no extra money. And what we would do is we would take existing faculty and we would give them new responsibilities and we would bring them together. So that's what we proposed, a cost-neutral school of public policy. When we presented that to the administrators, they said, this is exactly what we've been looking for. We can raise money based on this. If you come with the resources, the human resources, the knowledge base, and the intrinsic motivation, faculty who really want to do this without having money provided for them, we can actually then use that to raise money. So what happened after we created the structure of the school, then we were able to raise money. And it turns out that there was a donor who was willing to supply some funds for School of Public Policy, and his name is Jeb E. Brooks, and that's why we are called the Jeb E. Brooks School of Public Policy at Cornell. So it was an interesting illustration. I tell you this because we thought that a School of Public Policy at Cornell had to exist because it served a need that was unmet among the faculty that we currently had, and that it had a mission to serve the students that we could attract. And once we had that idea, the vision of what it would look like, then the resources came next. Rather than the old model that failed so many times, where we asked for resources and then thought we'd build something out of those resources, the idea came first, the commitment came first, and then we were able to build a really exciting institution on top of that. Now, why? This is where I'm going to turn to the Indonesian context. Why did we want to build a School of Public Policy at Cornell, aside from the fact that we say any person, any study, and we couldn't do public policy without a school? The reason is because Cornell occupies a special position in the United States and a special position in the state of New York, which is the state where I live, where Cornell is located. Cornell unlike other high-profile Ivy League institutions in the United States, or private institutions, is both private and public. It is private because there is a university that was created as a private university, like any other private university in the world. But it's public because Cornell receives money from the state of New York to offer programs that serve the public interest. Right? It's sort of like other state universities in the United States, such as the University of Wisconsin, the University of California, the University of Texas, the University of Virginia. These are all public institutions that serve the state in which they're located. Cornell is the institution that serves the state of New York, right? So we have a public mission as part of our DNA. It's part of the institution's very DNA. At Cornell, many of my colleagues are paid by the state of New York rather than by the private side of the university to do things that serve public interest. Agricultural research, industrial relations, veterinary, home economics, and fields like this. So we said, public policy is what's missing. That's what will serve the state of New York. And that's how we justified to our funders and to the administrators that we are doing something in the interests of the broader state that we live in, and also for the United States as a country and for the world more generally. And I think that a School of Public Policy in Indonesia would serve the same function, but from an Indonesian perspective. The School of Public Policy in Indonesia would allow Indonesians to learn about the same problems I was just describing in the United States, but in the Indonesian context. How do we deliver policies that empower the people, that serve the people's interests, that allow people to flourish on their own, that allow people to enjoy a happy, healthy, prosperous, and free life? And as I said at the beginning of these remarks, these are the questions that I hear in Indonesia all the time. So in the same way that we have a desire for public policy education in the United States, I see the desire for public policy education here in Indonesia. You also face many of the same constraints, right? Schools of public policy in Indonesia are rare, right? The discipline of public policy is not a standard academic discipline in Indonesia. That's just the same as the United States. So the kind of structural constraints that you face are very similar to what we face at Cornell. Of course, things must be adjusted to the Indonesian context. So you can't just take the model that I just described at Cornell and just apply it to Indonesia, because the local conditions of Indonesia are different, the needs are different, the structure of higher education is different. But I think that there are some things that I can share with you about how we do things at Cornell that might prove useful as you consider whether, when, and how to develop a School of Public Policy here in Indonesia. You are all familiar with the notion of risk-reward trade-off, right? Right? Low risk, low reward, high risk, high reward, right? In Indonesia, academic institutions are very good at creating stability, but at low risk, right? Indonesia, relative to the United States, has a model of higher education and a model of higher education administration, which is very much concerned with benchmarks, KPIs, understanding how it is that we measure the output of our colleagues. In the United States and at Cornell, we adopt a different approach. The approach that we follow at Cornell is developed by Cornell without the input of any government institution. And it's a high risk, high reward strategy. High risk, high reward means I have no KPIs as a professor. I have things that I have to do. I have to teach my classes, and I should do research, but never in my life have I been asked to demonstrate that I've fulfilled a stated objective. Right? Instead, they make a bet on me. They give me a position, they give me an opportunity, and then they say, well, see what you can do. See what comes out of this. A high risk, high reward strategy such as this has real risks, right? Risks come, like rewards come with risks. What is the risk? The risk is that I might not do anything. The risk is that I might not be very good. If you don't make me justify what I do, maybe I will do nothing. I know stories of colleagues at Cornell, whose names I will not share, who don't go to the office, who don't write papers, who don't teach very well. And they annoy us because it feels like they're not doing their job, right? But there's no punishment, right? In the United States higher education system, you don't fill out forms that document what you've done. Instead, you reveal at one point in time in your professional life what you have done, right? And there is no benchmark, there is no standard, right? Rather, they say, we give you freedom to choose what you will study, to choose how you will work. And with great freedom comes great responsibility. And that's the model that we follow at Cornell. I think that is a really useful model in the US context. Could never be implemented at the same way in Indonesia because the education system here is different. The rules for higher education are different. Your Ministry of Education regulates things. So I'm not saying to you that you should implement the model that we have in the United States, because that's not possible. That's just not the way that it works. But what I do want to share with you is the idea of understanding why a risk-reward trade-off exists and the benefits of moving more towards the risk side with the benefit of having more rewards. Because one thing that public policy education can do is identify leaders. This was a theme that Ibu Director was talking about, the importance of leadership here. Look, building public leadership, it's written right up there. How do we build public leadership? One thing that I am certain, of which I'm totally certain, is that leadership has no KPIs. Leadership has no pre-known benchmarks. We cannot cultivate leaders by giving them objectives to fulfill. Instead, we create conditions under which leaders can emerge. We give them responsibilities, we give them opportunities, and we see how they flourish. Building public leadership in a school of public policy means both ensuring that people have proper technical knowledge and proper domain-specific expertise in the things that they do, but then also freeing them, liberating them. I make this motion, like a bird is going to fly away, right? We allow our leaders to blossom on their own, fully aware that we can never know better than them what they are best able to do. This model of public policy education that we follow at Cornell, and which I think with appropriate adjustments could be useful here in Indonesia, is one that encourages exploration. It encourages entrepreneurship, right? An entrepreneur is by definition somebody who has thought of something that's never been thought of before. You can't have a KPI for something you don't know about. So a entrepreneurial, leadership-focused public policy education is one that's inculcating students, future leaders, with knowledge about the process, with knowledge about evidence, with knowledge about the institutional context, but with the confidence to explore beyond what we as teachers and researchers know. So we're thinking about public policy education not as an engineering problem, right? Not as a science. Of course there is science in public policy. Of course there's There's like hard data that we use, and we use numbers. I love statistics. I love to play with regressions and crosstabs and things like this. We must know those things, but those are the ingredients for leadership. They aren't leadership themselves. So when we think about building public leadership and the role of the School of Public Policy in Indonesia in doing that, what we are doing is imagining that being a leader is something more like an art or a craft than a science or an engineering problem. Let's take the example. I'll give you some examples. I'm not an engineer, but I know that engineers build bridges. And if you wish to build a bridge that doesn't fall down, there's an equation that you follow. There's a set of procedures that one follows to anticipate the strength of the concrete, the rebar that's required, the physical dimensions of the bridge, and you can calculate under a set of assumptions the expected lifespan of that bridge. That is engineering. There's no creativity involved. It's something in which one applies known engineering formulas to achieve an objective. My wife is not an engineer. She's a musician. What does a musician do? A musician trains really, really carefully to play their instrument. But but you can never anticipate the creative aspect of musical performances. And so when she performs, nobody's sitting there with, no, what you're doing is you're encouraging creativity, right? We know that a musician is good if they make us feel something that we could not have anticipated. I think that public policy education is much closer to being a musician than to being an engineer. Now, my wife practices a lot, and she does her scales, and she works her fingers, and she's doing all of these things that seem to be much more mechanical, and they are. And that's the ingredients of public policy education: statistics, institutional analysis, the policy process, national context. So understanding how to estimate the effect of building a new road on the welfare of people around you, or understanding what are the legal requirements in a country like Indonesia that prevent, or that are necessary to take into account when building a high-speed rail, right? These are things that are technical aspects. They're sort of like my wife playing her scales. You've got to do these things to be a good public policy scholar. And a good public servant knows those things. They know evidence, they know politics, they know process, they know institutions. But building public leadership means giving something else beyond that. Those are the foundations. But cultivating public leadership means understanding that the job of a leader is not to be an engineer. The job of the leader is to be a musician, an artist. It's a craft. It's something that cannot be planned. It's something that requires training, but the training is not about how to build the bridge. It is about how to play the solo, right? And that's something that only can be done by understanding the limits of education. So I've gone on for about 30 minutes, so I'll just maybe close here with a couple final thoughts. My initial comments talked about the United States and the sorry state of American democracy, right? And I want to emphasize, I really do have worries about American politics, but I also have optimism about the long-term future. The thing that worries me the most about what is happening in the United States right now is the loss of public policy expertise. It's not just that people who have different values than me are making decisions that I disagree with. It's that my government is de-emphasizing knowledge at all and expertise. It says that to be a leader is to be a strong man. To be a leader is to be arrogant, to be powerful, to be virile, right? To be somebody who can make the world act the way that he wants. And the consequence of this is de-emphasizing knowledge. Take the example of Maduro. My government launched a very successful military operation to kidnap Maduro, bring him to New York City. The military thing was easy. But do you notice nobody thought about what to do next? And not just they didn't think about it, they didn't think that they had to think about it. They weren't interested. They weren't curious about what's going to happen next. Now, we know, look, my country has messed up invasions before. When I first came to Indonesia, tahun 2004, ingatlah, Iraq, right? We messed that up bad. One thing that happened as a consequence of that, though, is Americans like me thought very hard about how to never do that again. How do we avoid putting ourselves in a situation like this? How do we avoid killing people for no reason? How do we avoid making big, big mistakes that affect other people? And there's a huge amount of public policy knowledge in the United States about how to solve that problem, right? It's not an engineering problem. You can't engineer democracy in Iraq, although some people tried. But what you can know is what is easy, what is hard, what is possible, what is not. And what I see in my country is a deliberate attempt to undermine public policy by undermining understandings of the policy process and undermining expertise. Right? We are making a big mistake in my country. It will have consequences that affect the entire world. It's a source of great shame, and it's very stupid. In the Indonesian context, the national conditions are different. The challenges are different. The needs are different. Indonesia is not the United States. But I also see in Indonesia, because this is the thing that I hear from every conversation I have with my friends, with my acquaintances, and with people I meet, public policy knowledge is needed. I don't think that the policy expertise has been destroyed in this country. I think policy expertise does exist, but we need more of it. We need it in Jakarta. We need it in the desa. We need it in the provinces. We need it in Menlu, right? We need people across this country to have the policy expertise that I talked about. And we can do this, you can do this, not by treating public policy as an engineering problem, KPIs, but treating it as a scientific process and as a craft, an art form, in which you equip people with knowledge and then empower them to create. And I would love to share with you any thoughts that you have and answer any questions you might have. Thank you.
Give round of applause to Professor Thomas Pepinsky. Your insights is very important, fascinating, because it's really bring us to think about what are we doing right now? If we're having so many public policy schools, and we're building, I mean, Indonesia is now like, this is like a market. Public policy schools in Indonesia is like a market that flourishes. But what is it can do to us if the functions itself is like disappeared? You cannot teach without knowledge, implement it in a correct way, to deliver it to the people and let the people also participate and understand that they are also part of public policy, right? And especially in Indonesia, when you're bringing your stories about the Maduro. So I was thinking about how Indonesia got intervened by the CIA in 1965 and then topple the Sukarno's regime and then replace it with Suharto. What happened later? 32 years we are under dictatorship. So the policy is not, it shouldn't be engineered, right? But you should have also knowledge, and you should also know that this is an art. So that's where the public policy school is supposed to be. National Institute of Administrations, that is the predecessors of our now institution, National Institute of Public Administrations, was built during the Cold War era. So the mentality is 1960s about Cold War. The school itself is meant to be established by our founder, Professor, one of them is Professor Prayudi. So he wanted, and he in his time thought that we need a school that can teach public policy, public administration for the new kind of bureaucracy leadership. Thinking about having multidisciplinary as the base or the foundations of the school. It's like at Cornell, right? And then he invited like all the schools in Indonesia, University of Indonesia, ITB, University of Gajah Mada, teachers about the public administration, the public policy, and letting them know that we need to integrate political knowledge, public policy that can be implemented. Not only teaching about the theories, but how to implement it. So in this kind of like situations, the environment's like changing, right? Regime changing. And now you mentioned about the regimes now like doesn't care anymore about how policy making is supposed to be an art. It's a craft. It is not only about theory, and then in the implementation, it's just like different. Okay, back to the question now. I can ramble. But again, you mentioned about the leadership, right? And talking about the leadership, especially bureaucracy leadership, is it essential or still important for us to have a public policy school run by the government and then also can reform or at least participate in how the country should be directed, especially how to formulate the policy that can be executable regardless of how the top leadership is heading. So that's my very basic questions, perhaps.
That's a hard question. But hard questions are the best questions because they force us to think. So I know there's public policy institutions being developed here in Indonesia with different sort of models, different sort of relations with other universities around the world, different relationships with the US government or with the Indonesian government. I think a healthy school of public policy knows themselves and understands themselves. Tahu diri, percaya diri. Which means there will be schools of public policy that are connected to the government. That a public institution may legitimately exist that takes into consideration the interests of the government and is accountable at some level to the government. I think that is something that can exist. There will also be private or international versions of the same. But when I think about what I think is the right model for how a public policy school connected to the government would exist, it needs to have embedded autonomy. Embedded autonomy is a phrase that comes from a sociologist named Peter Evans. Autonomy means the ability to formulate and execute policy on its own or plans on its own. And so An autonomous school is one that implements plans that according to its own interests and their own priorities. But embedded means they understand that they are in the context of a broader political system. Peter Evans used the concept of embedded autonomy to understand the Japanese bureaucracy. The Japanese bureaucracy is famously quite effective at formulating policies and implementing policies. And it's pretty autonomous. It is not fundamentally connected to the government, even though it is a creation of the government. But it's embedded in the sense that it takes into consideration, it has the ability to learn about government priorities and private priorities and the interests of the people in the regions and the NGOs, civil society, and so forth. I think that is a good model to strive for a public policy institution connected to a government, right? As in the Indonesian case. Embedded autonomy would mean the ability to formulate on its own standards of excellence, standards of evaluation, and to the extent that they're necessary, things like KPIs. But it would be embedded in the sense that it would have the ability to learn what are the needs of the government, of the people, of the NGOs, of the private sector, and so forth.
That's excellent answer. So for those in the Zoom and also here that perhaps not coming directly from the National Institute of Public Administrations or teaching at the National School of Public Administrations, this school essentially in the previous history would like to serve something like what you just said. We can be autonomous, but we can also think about how we can influence ourselves to the policy making in the context that there are not only us, but also there are NGOs, private, and also other government institutions that we need to collaborate, right? To provide context and to know what we are. Okay, I don't want to talk about things too far and too long, but I would like to give opportunity to the audience. I will also give opportunity for the audience in the virtual. There's already questions. So let's give the floor first and then do the virtual platform. Okay, I'll take 2 questions first. Okay. One from gentleman with red shirt. You will have to let him know the name. And then you with batik ya, Pak, ya? Okay. And then I will also ask questions from, take questions from the virtual platform. And then I will take 2 ladies. So 2 gentlemen from here, 2 ladies from the virtual. Please be mindful when you raise the questions, you should probably make it very simple, not too long, because we don't have that much time. Professor Tom Pepinsky needs to meet important people at Dewan Ekonomi Nasional. So we should make it very efficient. Please mention your name, your affiliations, and then the questions, please.
Okay, thank you, Bu Ratri. Professor Thomas, it's so nice to have you here. I'm Budi Fernando Tumanggor. I'm in the study program of Human Resource Management Apparatus. I have only one question, but I want to know, based on your view or opinion, what form of public policy school would be most suitable for Indonesia's current conditions? Because you know that we are so many problems in Indonesia regarding to our political culture, our government leadership style, and also our corruption culture. And what about also our strategic position in the global order, especially our country? Thank you.
Thank you, Pak Budi. I think you can just respond.
Thank you, Papudi. I think that the answer to your question is that the, the best type of public policy school is the kind that we made at Cornell. And that is also it has a couple features which I think would be really useful for for the Indonesian context. The distinguishing features are most members of our faculty have a disciplinary background. It's fundamentally interdisciplinary. There is no person in our school whose only appointment is in the School of Public Policy. The only exception is the dean. Everybody else has a disciplinary appointment. I'm a political scientist. My friend Mike is an economist. My friend Maria is an economist. My friend Shelley is a sociologist. My friend Julia is a lawyer. It's the combination, the interdisciplinary structure is the essential thing. So that means people who understand how to evaluate policy qualitatively and quantitatively. So you'll need applied economists and political scientists, also probably sociologists, people who understand the law to talk about issues of corruption. So that means people who are lawyers, constitutional specialists. You'll probably also need people who understand international relations. So people trained in diplomacy and international relations. And you'll probably also need historians, right? We probably need to remember that every public policy problem we face in Indonesia today existed in some form previously. So you want a School of Public Policy that combines disciplines, combines methods, and combines deep knowledge of Indonesia with deep knowledge of the globe and of history. That is what we have tried to build at Cornell. And I will say, that's because that's what I want. and I built the school, so I get to choose. But I believe that's the right model for Cornell, and I also think it's the right model for Indonesia.
Okay, thank you so much, Tom. Maybe you can briefly, before we move to the gentleman in batik, like programs in your School of Public Policy, what are those?
The degrees, yes.
The degrees, and also like the interest, the subject interest.
Yes. So the disciplines we are political science, sociology, economics, communication, history, law, medicine. Those are the disciplines. The subject areas in which we specialize are international security. There's 7. I won't remember them all, but I'll do my best. International security, the environment, the politics and economics of development, healthcare, inequality, race and racism, and one more that I forget. It's not gender. Gender is important, but it's not one of the ones. There's one more. I can never remember all 7. And the degrees we have are comprehensive. We offer a Bachelor of Science in Public Policy, a Master's of Public Policy, a Master's of Public Administration, a Master's of Health Administration, and a PhD. So we have several professional master's degrees for people who are going to be policy practitioners or managers. Many go to the private sector, many go to public sector. But we also have PhDs, doctors of public policy. But the real core of the Cornell School of Public Policy is the undergraduate education. We take students who apply to Cornell stipulating they wish to be policy scholars, and we train them from the very beginning. What that means is we have there's like different ways that you can organize the Cornell School of Public Policy. An org chart is not the way to do it. There's no hierarchy, right? If you tried to draw the hierarchy, it wouldn't work. Instead, the way that you should think about it as layers. Like, on your map on your phone, You can click different layers and it shows you different things, roads, rivers, political boundaries, and they're all different maps, different ways of organizing the same thing. That's how you should think about the organization of Cornell. You can organize it by discipline, by degree, or by subject area. And they sort of interlock and interweave that way.
Great. So let's move on to the gentleman. Pak, silakan Pak. Don't forget to mention your name and also your affiliations.
Okay, thank you, Bu Ratri, for the best opportunity you give to me. And thank you, Professor Thomas, for having us here. I would like to ask about, you said that before Cornell
Your
University
name is?
okay, sorry. My name is Serbio Haririo. I'm a student of doctoral program in here. I'm from Ministry of Energy and Natural Resources. Yeah, right now I'm strategist in Ministry of Energy and Natural Resources. You said before that it's hard to establish a School of Public Policy in Cornell Uni, right? Over the past 60 years ago, you said that people at the Cornell University trying to build a School of Public Policy. My question is, why don't you some kind of collaboration or do some comparative study or benchmarking study at Ivy League, another Ivy League universities such as Princeton? They have a School of Public Policy since 1930, if I don't make mistake. There's Harvard University or the Kennedy School, they built School of Public Policy in 1936, if I don't make mistake, and or maybe another Ivy League, Columbia University, they built a School of Public Policy in 1946. Another public policy school outside the U.S., maybe Blavatnik University at Oxford University. Is there any collaboration from Cornell University, or maybe you can share to us so that maybe we can do some kind of collaboration, just like you're doing. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Pat. So that's a great question. And I didn't mention it, but we did do that benchmarking study. So Maria, my co-director of the initiative, and I, before we got started, what we tried to do is survey other existing schools of public policy to see what the options were. Like, what are the different ways that public policy schools can exist? And so we took into consideration Princeton, Harvard, Columbia, Michigan, Berkeley, UCLA, and I think a couple more. NYU. There's a couple. And so what we discovered from that is like a really fundamental point, which is that there are many different ways that you can create a school of public policy. Harvard and Princeton are entirely different in the way that they organize their school of public policy. In Harvard, the school is very independent. In Princeton, it's very closely related to the disciplines. And that doesn't mean that Princeton's worse or Harvard is worse. It means that there are different choices. We had the one benefit, and we talked to people at all the universities as well, and every university complained about itself. Everybody said, well, we don't like this thing about ourselves. But it's hard to change because history matters and it's hard to change. What we realized was that the goal of this exercise is not to pick the right kind in an abstract sense, but we had to pick the right model that fits Cornell. And the model that fits Cornell is the Princeton model. And so the Brooks School of Public Policy is closest to the Princeton model of a school of public policy. Doing this, we realized that the obstacle to a public policy had always been money and like established interest. And we thought that given this is, again, this is the perfect example of a policy problem. Building a school of public policy is itself a policy problem. We discovered that the thing that we needed to respond to was not the objective, correct way to make a school of public policy, but what are the constraints that we face? And given that we did not have free money to build a Kennedy school or a Ford school or a Luskin school or Goldman school, we had to build something like CLIA at Princeton. And that's what we chose, and it's worked really well.
Right, thank you. Let's move on to the audience in the Zoom. Please can anyone show the questions? So currently we have 172 participants joining us in the Zoom. Okay. Can you read it from here? So this is a question from Dwi Indah. What's the first questions on the top? Muzani Mansur, is that? Okay. Pak Muzani Mansur has a question for you. What strategies does Ivy League schools, Cornell University, apply amidst Trump's administrations? Wow, this is very straight to the point. Lesson learned for us, the School of Public Administrations in Indonesia. We need to be careful. Please.
Number one lesson, don't elect President Trump. That's actually a really good school. That's a really important question. And even though it's difficult and contentious to answer it, I will answer it because it really matters.
Professor, sorry. I've been waiting since you mentioned Trump and there's a question on Trump. One quick question, Buratri. How scholars of public administrations currently perceive what is Trump's doing in Venezuela?
I will answer that one too.
Okay.
Let me start with Bun Nurlia. Most public policy scholars see great risk in Trump's decision to kidnap Maduro. You can approach this question in many different ways. You can approach this like, was it legal? Probably not.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, certainly not legal internationally, but it probably wasn't legal domestically either. You can approach this question about, did they have a plan? No. But the much more, here's a really tricky question that I will ask back to you. In point of fact, right now, we have kidnapped, the United States has kidnapped Maduro. What responsibility do we have to the Venezuelan people now?
Mm-hmm.
I can't undo that. I can't change that fact. What is my responsibility? I think that my responsibility is at the very least to speak the truth. And the truth is they did not plan for what happens next. And you can see, because whenever anybody is interviewed, Rubio, Hegseth, Trump, Vance, Miller, they just make up an answer. It's not consistent. They didn't plan. So public policy scholars diagnose the problem, but public policy scholars also diagnose the solution. We offer suggestions. And a good public policy lesson, as you know, should my answer reflect American priorities or should it reflect Venezuelan priorities? That's an ethical question. It's not a science question. It's not an engineering question. I believe that the answer must be how to help the Venezuelan people. And I believe that my government is not going to try to do that. And so that means I have a responsibility. Imagine this, Ibu. If President Trump called you on the phone and said, Ibu, help fix Venezuela, what would you say? Yes or no?
Tricky questions.
Tricky question, right? I think that I would say no in my case because I don't know enough about Venezuela.
Yeah.
Right. But I also think very clearly if the next American president calls me on the phone and says, Tom, help me fix the American State Department, would I say yes or no? I would say yes.
Yes.
I would say yes. Right. So let me turn to the question about our strategies. Again, a tricky question, a contentious question. The Ivy League schools have adopted very different approaches to responding to the Trump administration. And they range from conceding and surrendering in the case of Columbia to refusing in the case of Princeton. And that variation is interesting. Cornell has signed an agreement with the administration, and that makes everybody upset. But I also believe that my university's leadership is wisely making the best choice given constraints right now. And one thing that I know from my personal experience about our administration is that they treated this as a policy problem, right? What are our resources? What are our constraints? What are our objectives? How do we work from those objectives backwards to achieve the best possible outcome? And so we've paid a fine, which is the bribe, and we got our money back. And on net, this was the right choice. Lessons for Stialan. Look, this institution has a different relationship with the Indonesian government than any U.S. university has with the American government. There is no American National University, right? There's no Australian National University equivalent in the United States. There's nothing like the National University of Singapore. So every American university is somewhat independent in terms of organization and leadership, but dependent in terms of finance on the government. And we must, and I don't care who hears this, we must guard our independence in the United States. Our universities must guard their independence preciously. It's the most important thing. We have to have a freedom to teach. We have to have a freedom to criticize. We have to have a freedom to follow the evidence and read things and teach them, even if they're unpopular, even if they're dangerous. Because that's the one thing, that's the risk-reward trade-off. We want to take the risks for that reward. I cannot argue that Stialan can do the same thing because your relationship to the government is different. So you must find your own way. And I encourage you to think of embedded autonomy as the right way to do it.
The buzzword, embedded autonomy. Yeah. Okay, shall we move on to the next questions from the audience in the Zoom? Please, can you show up the questions? Okay. This is from PKUB. I'm just reading the top part, okay? PKUB Pak Ali. With your kind permission, Professor, what is the key role of public policy education in shaping public leaders with integrity in Indonesia? From Kementerian Agama, ya, Pak Ali. And that I probably can follow up which balance that you should find in the cabinet, oversized cabinet, between technocrats and also politicians.
I mean, what The way that I would answer that question is actually to focus on ethics. Right? I think a public policy degree, public policy education includes ethics. We require ethics for our students. They must take at least one class on ethical leadership. And ethical leadership is not about like what is the ethical like what's the right outcome. Ethical leadership is about what's the right process. What is the right, how do you cultivate among your leaders the correct beliefs? Public policy education must train leaders to think about their ethical obligations. And it must speak plainly and honestly and directly about the real trade-offs that leaders face in the public policy domain. You know who is not required to take ethics? Any elected politician. Public policy education is not training politicians, it's training bureaucrats and leaders, civil servants. They must learn ethics because our politicians don't.
What an excellent answer. Well, that we need to think about that because we used to think that perhaps politicians can change if we teach them how to, well, the basic, how to formulate a good policy. But, well, we kind of have this pessimistic view from Professor Thomas Pepinsky. But yeah, we should be very critical. That's what probably the underlying message that you are conveying to us. That's the importance of public policy school, to teach bureaucrats and also those people who really keen to learn the bureaucracy and how the policy making should be done. Again, we still have time, around probably 10 minutes or less. I would like to take questions, one from the floor and then one from the Zoom. Is there any from the floor would like to pose a questions? Please do so. And please raise your hand. Any? If not, I'm taking the question from the Zoom. Actually, yes. Yeah, actually, from Zoom, you can ask directly to Professor Thomas Pepinsky. Is there any? You just use the raise hand tools or just say it? Please? No? Okay, I'll read the question then. Can you show the questions again? The chat. Okay. So I'm surprised there's no female asking question except with director. Going up. I intentionally wants to hear more from women voice.
Setuju.
Oh, here. Okay. From Ibu Dwi Indah Kartik. Question for Mr. Pepinsky. Good morning, moderator. Oh, good morning. And I have two questions. One, how can such an institution enhance policy professionalism within the civil service and public sector leadership? Second, in what ways can a school of public policy strengthen leadership, ethical governance, and strategic thinking among public officials?
These are great questions. And I think they have the same answer. And it's related to the answer I gave before about ethical training, future leaders in their ethical responsibilities explicitly, right? It's in the same way that public policy leadership is not an engineering problem, it's a craft, right? It's an art. Understanding explicitly that public sector officials and civil servants will face ethical dilemmas and ethical challenges, and making that an explicit part of the education process, perhaps role playing, perhaps examples, perhaps case studies, is I think the only way that you can do this. But we should admit it's also very hard, right? It's difficult to convince people to behave in ways that run against their interests sometimes. But the only way that we can combat that or push against it, I think, is to teach them. And we must teach them openly, honestly, and explicitly about their ethical responsibilities. Not, again, we don't tell them what to do. Remember, when scholars in the United States, when people visit and we ask them, when they ask, what should I do when I'm here? We say, you do what you want. We'll just hold you account later, right? It's not about telling them what they can and cannot do. It's telling them how to evaluate decisions on their own, right? A politician, or I'm sorry, if a civil servant who only refrains from stealing because they're afraid they're going to be caught is not behaving ethically, right? A civil servant who says, I should not steal because it's wrong, that's one who's behaving ethically. And inculcating that explicitly is important.
Right.
One more thing. Despite what I just said, I think public policy education can also teach accountability, right? So ethically forward thinking about how to make ethical decisions in future decisions, but also how to think about one's obligations and about how to design systems that keep people accountable.
Excellent. So, ladies and gentlemen, we apparently only have 5 minutes. I think we should wrap up. Okay. But point to take away from our discussions, perhaps the importance of public policy school is very crucial, right? It teaches us about ethics. It should teach us about ethics. It should teach us also about how to become leaders that can be accountable. But for us who's building and trying to make the school public policy thriving in this kind of situations, perhaps the embedded autonomy that we can trying to picture ourselves by that embedded autonomy, we can have sort of like independence, but not independency in the sense that we have total freedom, because we have to put ourselves in the context, right? We have to make ourselves matters within the system, within the governance system. Okay, and in policy, in politics. So I will not conclude or anything, since Bu Nurlia is also asking to be yeah, she wants to say something apparently. But is it okay? I will let Bu Director or Bu Nurlia to say some things about yeah, whatever she would like to say. Please do. Bu Nurlia, are you there? Your mic is not yet on. Bu Nurlia, do you hear me?
Yes, yes.
Yes.
Sorry.
Yeah. We're reaching the end of our discussion, and since you raise your hand, yeah, please.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh, you're not?
It's just accidentally.
Oh, okay. So
Yeah,
I thought
yeah.
you were going to
No.
say something, a closing or something.
Sorry.
No?
Oh, yeah. Is it a
Or probably you
closing?
want to, yeah, you want to say,
Professor Kensi, will you stay until tomorrow probably? When will you fly?
Medan,
Tonight
tomorrow morning.
or tomorrow morning? Oh, I'm so sorry. I'm still in Jatinangor. Well, if it is the end of discussions, we have a lot of hopes actually for this public administration and NIPA, also Stialan as a core of public administration studies. We expect to be strengthened by many kind of discussions, and having you here also one of effort to strengthen our method, so our students get the view from overseas view, especially when you mention, oh, you're not happy about Trump's war, what's going on there. Okay, we are in line on that. But then we expect to have more collaboration, and our students, our participants, the members of public who also eager to increase knowledge on public policy. The problem of public policy in anywhere, especially in developing countries, that people are left behind in the public policy. They name it as public policy, but when they make this policy, they make a hidden place without a knowledge of public. So that's what I'm saying in my remark before. How do public policy really become a policy for public? Certainly how to make public participation in the making process of policy. And we need more knowledge, we need more practices, we need more realities showing that, yes, getting more people in public voice will make a better public policy. Again, thank you very much. Thank you for giving your time. You have a really tight schedule with us. Bu Ratri, thank you for forcing Professor Pepinsky to be with us. I understand
he's
that.
even organizer.
Yeah, I understand that he has so many things to do in Indonesia. And for all fellows who has joined this discussions, public discussion, thank you very much. We expect to see you in other discussion. Thank you again. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam Bu Nurlia. Maybe since I give you opportunity, Bu Director, to close this with statement, I will give you also opportunity to close the statement, encouraging statement for us, academic society, ecosystem of public policy analysts, or ordinary people that show up and then want to listen to your lecture.
I think it's important to remember. So first off, thank you to everyone for spending some time with me this morning. It's my great honor to be able to speak to you. And I feel a great debt of gratitude to Indonesia for being so special to me. And any opportunity I have to share my thoughts with you is very special with me. The optimistic thing, perhaps inspirational, perhaps frightening, is that future of public policy is up to you. Right? And so it will be what you make of it. I am very optimistic that Indonesia has the capacity to implement truly wonderful public policy education, and that you have an important role to play in it. But remember that nobody will do it without you. It has to be you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Give a round of applause. Again, this is very insightful, engaging, and we would love to host you whenever you come to Indonesia. We'd love to host you again and then share your knowledge, experience, and hopefully United States by the time you're visiting is going to be better than today. So we are also hope the same thing with our Indonesian country. Again, thank you so much for participating, audience here and audiences also in the virtual platform. I'm sorry if I cannot take more questions in this discussion, but if you would like to have more questions, you can probably just drop your comments in the chat box, and then I can communicate that to Professor Tom Pepinsky later. Again, thank you so much. And then public policy school, public policy community cannot be done without you all. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Selamat siang. Good.
Terima kasih, terima
Afternoon.
kasih.
Oh, wait.
Izin live ya, Bu Ratri.
Yeah, I
dan
will leave it to
teman-teman.
the MC.
Okay, thank you very much, Professor Thomas, Mrs. Ratri, and all participants for the fruitful insight. Once again, let's give a warm round of applause for them. Ladies and gentlemen, now we have come to reach to the end of our event. On behalf of the committee, we would like to give greatest appreciations for Mr. Thomas for the soundful insight and for attendees for the participations and discussions. To all remaining audience, please fill the list attendance that will be shown in the screen. Okay, you can fill this link to get the certificate for this event. Okay, that's a wrap, everyone. We hope you found this event informative and useful. Once again, thank you all for spending time with us today. Apologies for any shortcoming. See you again on our next initiative. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.